The coffee shop on Fifth Avenue buzzed with the usual morning chaos of Seattle's business district. I sat at my regular corner table, the one with the clear view of Pike Place Market, watching the steam rise from my untouched latte while reviewing the presentation slides on my laptop. The quarterly reports for Henderson and Associates looked impressive this month. Our architectural firm had just landed the Morrison Center project, a $40 million contract that would establish us as one of the premier design companies in the Pacific Northwest. My name is Michael Thompson. I'm 34 years old, and I work as the senior partner at Henderson and Associates here in Seattle. Most people would say I have everything figured out. Corner office on the 23rd floor, Mercedes in the parking garage, a beautiful fiancée named Sarah who works in marketing for a tech startup downtown. From the outside, my life looks like the American dream realized. But sitting here in this coffee shop, surrounded by the hum of conversations and the hiss of espresso machines, I cannot shake the feeling that something fundamental is missing. The morning light filtered through the large windows, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors. I watched a businessman hurry past, phone pressed to his ear, briefcase swinging at his side. Another corporate warrior fighting battles that would be forgotten by next quarter. Was that all I was too? Another suit chasing contracts and commissions while the years slipped away? I closed my laptop and leaned back in the leather chair. Tonight was important. Sarah and I were finally going to announce our engagement to my family. We had been together for 3 years, living together for 18 months, and the ring had been sitting in my dresser drawer for 2 weeks while I worked up the courage to make it official with the people who raised me. The Thompson family dinner was a monthly tradition, one of the few constants in my otherwise chaotic professional life. My foster parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, had taken me in when I was 6 years old. They already had 2 biological children, Eric and Michelle, who were 8 and 10 at the time. For 28 years, I had been trying to earn my place at their table, to prove that I belonged in their family portrait that hung in the hallway of their Bellevue home. Tonight felt like another test, another opportunity to show them that I had made something of myself, that their investment in me had paid off. The irony was not lost on me. Here I was, a successful architect who designed homes for other families, while still struggling to feel at home in my own. I had built a career creating spaces where people belonged, yet I remained an outsider looking in through windows I had drawn myself. I glanced at my watch. 9:15. The presentation to the Morrison Center board was at 11, which gave me enough time to finish my coffee and walk the 6 blocks to their downtown office. The September air would be crisp and clean, carrying the scent of salt water from Elliott Bay and the promise of autumn. Seattle in September was my favorite time of year, when the summer crowds had departed and the city belonged to those of us who called it home. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Nervous about tonight? You'll be great. They love you." I smiled despite myself. Sarah had a way of cutting through my anxiety with simple truths. She had met my family exactly 4 times in 3 years, and each time she insisted that they treated me like any other son. But Sarah had grown up in a household where love was expressed freely, where approval did not need to be earned through achievement and validation did not require constant performance. The Thompson family operated differently. Love was conditional, measured in accomplishments and compared against expectations. Eric had become a doctor, following Robert's footsteps into medicine. Michelle had married well, producing 3 grandchildren who filled Linda's Instagram feed with their soccer games and piano recitals. And then there was me, the architect, the foster child who had made good but never quite good enough. I had learned early that attention in the Thompson household came through success. Good grades earned praise. Trophies brought hugs. Academic achievements warranted family phone calls to distant relatives. But affection itself, the simple warmth of being loved without conditions, remained elusive. Even now, at 34, I found myself overcompensating, over-delivering, overperforming in hopes of finally feeling like I truly belonged. The Morrison Center project was my latest attempt to prove my worth. The contract would be the largest in our firm's history, a mixed-use development that would include luxury condominiums, retail spaces, and a community center. When the board approved our design next week, I would finally have something substantial to share at the monthly family dinner. Something that might prompt Robert to lean back in his chair and say those words I had been chasing for 28 years. "I'm proud of you, son." But even as I imagined that moment, doubt crept in like morning fog rolling off the sound. Would it ever be enough? Would any accomplishment finally grant me the sense of belonging I craved? Or was I destined to remain forever on the periphery of the family that had given me their name but never quite their hearts? I opened my laptop again and scrolled through the emails that had arrived overnight. 3 new client inquiries, a proposal request from a hotel chain, and a message from my assistant reminding me about the dry cleaning pickup. The ordinary business of an ordinary Tuesday, except for the weight of tonight's announcement pressing against my chest like a stone. Sarah's ring was a 2-carat solitaire set in platinum, chosen after weeks of research and consultation with jewelers across the city. It had cost more than my first car, but I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted the Thompsons to see that I could provide for Sarah the way Eric provided for his wife, the way successful men provided for the women they loved. Material evidence of my worthiness, wrapped in a small velvet box. The coffee shop door chimed as another customer entered, bringing with them the scent of rain and exhaust fumes. Outside, the city was waking up to another day of commerce and competition. Dreams chased and deals closed. I would rejoin that flow soon enough, but for now, I allowed myself this moment of quiet reflection. This brief pause before stepping back into the role of Michael Thompson, successful architect, devoted fiancé, grateful foster son. Tonight would change everything. Tonight, Sarah and I would become officially engaged, and I would finally have concrete proof that I had built a life worth celebrating. The Thompsons would welcome Sarah into the family, and perhaps finally, I would feel like I truly belonged there too. The thought both thrilled and terrified me, carrying the weight of 3 decades of longing wrapped in the promise of a single evening. I closed my laptop again and reached for my coffee, ready to fuel up for whatever the day might bring. The memory hit me like a cold wind off the sound, sudden and sharp. I was 7 years old, standing in the kitchen of the Thompson house, watching Linda prepare Christmas dinner. The entire house smelled like turkey and stuffing, cinnamon and pine needles from the tree in the living room. Eric and Michelle were in the family room wrapping last-minute gifts, their laughter echoing through the hallways. I had been with the family for almost 2 years at that point, long enough to know the rhythms of their holidays, but not long enough to feel secure in my place among them. Christmas morning had been wonderful. The Thompsons had given me a bicycle, red with white stripes, complete with training wheels and a bell that rang when I squeezed the handle. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. But as I stood in the kitchen that afternoon, watching Linda baste the turkey with practiced efficiency, I overheard a conversation that would haunt me for decades. Linda was talking to her sister on the phone, the one who lived in Portland and visited twice a year with her husband and daughters. "Oh, he's doing fine," Linda said, glancing at me as she spoke. "The social worker says he's adjusting well. Robert thinks we should keep him." There was a pause, and I pretended to be absorbed in the coloring book spread across the kitchen table. "Well, it's a big responsibility. He's not our blood, you know, but he's a good boy, quiet, tries hard to please. Keep him." The words echoed in my 7-year-old mind like stones dropped into a deep well. They were deciding whether to keep me, the way people decided whether to keep a stray dog that wandered into their yard. Eric and Michelle never had to worry about being kept. They belonged automatically, unconditionally, permanently. But I was a choice, a decision that could be unmade if I proved too much trouble or not worth the investment. From that Christmas forward, I became a student of belonging. I watched Eric and Michelle to learn how children were supposed to behave with their parents. I studied the way they asked for things, the way they complained about homework, the way they fought with each other and then reconciled without consequence. They had the luxury of being imperfect because their place in the family was guaranteed. I had no such security, so I became perfect instead. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect gratitude for every kindness shown to me. I never complained about chores or bedtimes. I never asked for things I wanted but did not need. I never raised my voice or slammed doors or exhibited any of the normal childhood rebellions that Eric and Michelle displayed without fear. I was the grateful foster child, always thankful, always trying harder, always aware that my place at the table was contingent on my continued good behavior. The strategy worked in its way. The Thompsons kept me. They paid for my college education, attended my graduation ceremonies, and included me in family photos. But the original wound never healed. The knowledge that I was a choice rather than a given colored every interaction, every holiday, every moment of connection. Even their kindness felt conditional, dependent on my ability to remain worthy of their continued investment. By the time I turned 18 and left for college, the pattern was set. I would achieve my way into acceptance, succeed my way into love, accomplish my way into belonging. The University of Washington School of Architecture became my sanctuary, a place where merit was measured in design solutions and creative vision rather than blood relations and family histories. I thrived there, graduating summa cum laude and earning a scholarship to continue my graduate studies. But even academic success could not fill the hollow space in my chest where unconditional love should have lived. I brought that emptiness with me into every relationship, every friendship, every professional interaction. I gave too much, tried too hard, apologized too often. I was the friend who always picked up the check, the colleague who worked weekends without complaint, the boyfriend who never asked for what he needed because asking felt too much like demanding something I had not earned. Sarah was the first person who saw through the performance. We had met at a gallery opening in Pioneer Square, both of us standing in front of a massive abstract painting that looked like a storm over water. She made some comment about the artist's use of negative space, and I found myself talking to her for 20 minutes about how architecture and art shared the same fundamental challenge: creating meaning from emptiness. She was beautiful, certainly, with dark hair that caught the light and eyes the color of coffee beans. But what drew me in was her directness, the way she asked questions and waited for real answers instead of polite deflections. When I told her I was an architect, she did not ask about money or prestige. She asked what I loved about creating spaces for people to inhabit. When I mentioned my family, she did not assume happiness or dysfunction. She simply listened and asked follow-up questions that suggested she was actually interested in my answers. Our first date stretched across an entire Saturday. Coffee became lunch, lunch became a walk through Pike Place Market, the walk became dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Belltown. We talked about everything: our work, our dreams, our fears about the future. I found myself telling her things I had never spoken aloud, including the complicated truth about growing up as a foster child in a family that treated me well but never quite let me forget that I was not originally theirs. Sarah listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything or explain it away. She simply accepted that my relationship with my family was complex and left space for that complexity to exist without resolution. It was the first time in my adult life that someone had seen my wounds without trying to heal them, acknowledged my struggles without minimizing them. As our relationship deepened, Sarah became my translator for normal family dynamics. She helped me understand that not every invitation required gratitude, that not every kindness needed to be repaid, that families could disagree and fight and still love each other unconditionally. Her own family was wonderfully chaotic, full of interruptions and inside jokes and casual affection that required no performance or justification. Spending holidays with Sarah's family was like visiting a foreign country where I did not speak the language but desperately wanted to learn. Her parents hugged me the first time we met, asked about my work because they were genuinely curious, and included me in their conversations without making me feel like I was being tested or evaluated. They argued about politics at the dinner table and then laughed about something else 5 minutes later. Love was simply assumed, never questioned, never contingent on achievement or behavior. But even as I marveled at the ease of Sarah's family relationships, I could not shake the old patterns with my own. The monthly Thompson dinners remained exercises in anxiety and performance. I still brought expensive wine and flowers for Linda. I still asked after Eric's medical practice and Michelle's children with genuine interest and careful attention. I still presented the highlights of my professional life like offerings on an altar, hoping for approval and recognition that felt increasingly hollow even when it came. The engagement ring sitting in my dresser drawer represented my latest attempt to bridge that gap. If I could present Sarah as my fiancée, if I could demonstrate my ability to build my own family, perhaps I would finally achieve the status I had been chasing for 28 years. Perhaps Robert would shake my hand and call me son without the slight hesitation that always preceded the word. Perhaps Linda would hug me with the same fierce pride she showed when embracing Eric or Michelle. Or perhaps nothing would change at all. Perhaps I would remain forever on the outside, no matter how successful I became, no matter who I married, no matter what I achieved. The thought terrified me more than I cared to admit. The coffee shop was beginning to empty as the morning rush moved toward lunch. I checked my watch again. 9:45. Time to head to the Morrison Center presentation. Time to step back into the role of successful architect and leave these old ghosts behind. But as I gathered my laptop and stood to leave, I could not escape the feeling that tonight's dinner would be more significant than even I realized. That the announcement of my engagement would set in motion events I could not predict or control. I walked to the counter to bus my table, leaving a generous tip for the barista who had kept my coffee cup full during my extended stay. As I headed toward the door, briefcase in one hand and laptop bag slung over my shoulder, I felt the familiar weight of expectations settling across my shoulders like a heavy coat. Another day of proving my worth was about to begin. The presentation to the Morrison Center board went better than I had dared hope. The conference room on the 32nd floor offered a stunning view of Elliott Bay, and I used the panoramic backdrop to emphasize how our design would complement the existing skyline while creating a distinctive landmark for the South Lake Union District. The board members asked thoughtful questions about sustainability features, traffic flow, and community impact. By the time I finished the 40-minute presentation, I could see approval in their faces. "Outstanding work, Michael," said Margaret Chen, the board chairwoman. "You've clearly thought through every aspect of this project. We'll have a final decision by Friday, but I think you can feel confident about the outcome." I shook hands with each board member, exchanging business cards and promising to send additional technical specifications by email. As I rode the elevator down to street level, I allowed myself a moment of genuine pride. The Morrison Center project represented everything I had worked toward: innovative design, sustainable construction, meaningful community impact. If we landed this contract, Henderson and Associates would be positioned for national recognition. The afternoon passed quickly with routine tasks: reviewing blueprints for a residential project in Queen and consulting with engineers about foundation requirements for a commercial building in Tacoma, returning calls from 3 potential clients who had heard about our Morrison Center proposal. By 5:30, the office was quiet except for the cleaning crew and a few associates working late on deadline projects. I packed my briefcase methodically, including the printed portfolio of our recent projects that I plan to share with the Thompsons tonight. Robert always asked about my work with the same polite interest he might show a neighbor's garden. But tonight felt different. Tonight, I would have something genuinely impressive to discuss, something that might finally earn the recognition I had been seeking for nearly 3 decades. The drive from downtown Seattle to the Thompson house in Bellevue normally took 45 minutes, but evening traffic stretched the journey to over an hour. I used the time to rehearse my announcement about Sarah, trying different approaches and imagining various responses. Should I make a formal speech before dinner, or wait until dessert for a more intimate revelation? Should I ask Robert's permission retroactively, acknowledging traditional protocols even though Sarah and I had already made our decision? Sarah was driving separately from her apartment in Capitol Hill, planning to arrive at 7:30, 30 minutes after dinner was scheduled to begin. We had agreed that I should have some time alone with my family before making our announcement, a chance to gauge the mood and find the right moment for our news. Sarah understood the careful choreography required for Thompson family interactions, the way conversations needed to be managed and timed to avoid conflict or awkwardness. The Thompson house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac lined with mature oak trees and well-maintained lawns. The 2-story colonial was painted cream with forest green shutters, exactly the same colors Linda had chosen when they moved there 15 years ago. A circular driveway led to a 3-car garage, and landscape lighting illuminated the carefully tended flower beds that bordered the walkway to the front door. I parked behind Eric's BMW and sat in my car for a moment, gathering my courage. Through the living room windows, I could see warm light and the movements of people preparing for dinner. This was home, or as close to home as I had ever known. These were my people, or as close to my people as I was likely to get. Tonight, I would share the most important news of my adult life with the family that had shaped me, for better and worse, into the man I had become. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. Linda Thompson stood in the doorway wearing a navy blue dress and the pearl necklace Robert had given her for their 25th anniversary. At 62, she remained an elegant woman, her silver hair styled in the same bob she had worn for decades, her makeup applied with the precision of someone who had never left the house looking less than perfectly put together. "Michael, right on time as always," she said, offering her cheek for the ritual kiss that began every family gathering. "You look tired, honey. Are you working too hard again?" "Just busy with a big project," I replied, handing her the bottle of wine I had selected that afternoon. A 2018 Chateau Margaux that had cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. "This is for dinner tonight." Linda accepted the wine with the same gracious smile she had perfected over decades of hosting dinner parties and charity events. "How thoughtful. Robert will appreciate this. He was just saying yesterday that we needed to add some quality wines to our collection." The house smelled like roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, comfort foods that reminded me of childhood Sunday dinners and holidays spent around the Thompson dining room table. Classical music played softly from speakers hidden throughout the house, something by Vivaldi that provided elegant background ambience without competing with conversation. Robert emerged from his study, still wearing the dress shirt and slacks he favored for his work at the hospital, though he had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. At 65, he remained an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair that had retreated to a distinguished fringe around his temples. His handshake was firm, his smile warm but measured. "Good to see you, Michael. Linda tells me you have some exciting news to share tonight." My stomach clenched slightly. I had not told Linda about the engagement specifically, only that Sarah and I had something important to discuss with the family. But Linda had a talent for reading between lines and drawing conclusions that were usually accurate. "Yes, sir. Sarah should be here shortly, and we'll fill everyone in then." Eric appeared from the kitchen, beer in hand, wearing the casual confidence that came naturally to successful people who had never doubted their place in the world. At 36, he had inherited Robert's height and Linda's refined features, creating the kind of classical good looks that opened doors and inspired trust. His medical practice was thriving, his marriage to Jennifer was stable, and their 2 children were already showing signs of academic excellence that would make their grandparents proud. "Little brother," Eric said, clapping me on the shoulder with genuine affection. "Mom's been mysterious about tonight's announcement. Please tell me you're not moving to another city for work." I laughed, appreciating Eric's directness. Of all the Thompson family members, Eric treated me most like a true brother, without the careful politeness that sometimes characterized my interactions with Robert and Linda. Nothing that dramatic, just some personal news that we're excited to share. Michelle arrived moments later with her husband David and their 3 children. Emma, 12, Jacob, 10, and Sophie, 8. The house immediately filled with the chaos of young voices and running feet as the kids claimed hugs from their grandparents and uncle before disappearing upstairs to play video games until dinner. Michelle looked tired but happy, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and her clothes bearing the comfortable wrinkles that came from a day spent managing homework and soccer practices and the general logistics of family life. She hugged me warmly, asking about work and whether I was taking care of myself and eating enough vegetables. This was the Thompson family at its best, gathered in the living room before dinner, sharing updates about their lives while Linda put finishing touches on the meal and Robert opened wine and Eric entertained his nieces and nephew with stories from the hospital. For a moment, I could almost forget the underlying tension that accompanied these gatherings, the sense that I was performing in a play where everyone else knew their lines but I was still improvising. Sarah arrived at 7:40, looking beautiful in a black dress that struck the perfect balance between elegant and understated. She had met the Thompson family 4 times previously, and each encounter had gone smoothly, with polite conversation and carefully expressed approval of our relationship. Sarah possessed the kind of classical beauty and professional accomplishment that parents wanted for their sons. Intelligent without being intimidating, successful without being overly ambitious, gracious without being subservient. Linda welcomed Sarah with the same warmth she showed to Jennifer, and Robert poured her a glass of wine while asking about her work at the marketing firm. Eric and Michelle included her in their conversation about weekend plans and restaurant recommendations. The children remembered her from previous visits and showed her drawings they had made at school. Within minutes, Sarah was seamlessly integrated into the family dynamic, contributing to conversations and laughing at inside jokes, as if she had been part of the Thompson clan for years. Dinner was served at 8 o'clock in the formal dining room, complete with china that had belonged to Linda's grandmother and silver that was polished to mirror brightness. The roast beef was perfectly cooked, the Yorkshire pudding light and airy, the roasted vegetables seasoned with herbs from Linda's garden. Conversation flowed easily across topics ranging from Eric's latest surgical cases to Michelle's volunteer work with the school district to Robert's plans for retirement from the hospital administration. I found myself relaxing as the evening progressed, remembering why I had originally been drawn to the stability and tradition the Thompson family represented. These were good people who had opened their home to a 6-year-old boy who needed a family. They had fed me and clothed me and educated me and supported my dreams even when those dreams led me in directions they did not fully understand. Whatever complicated emotions I carried about belonging and acceptance, I owed them a debt of gratitude that could never be fully repaid. As Linda served dessert, a chocolate tart with raspberry coulis that looked like something from a restaurant kitchen, I caught Sarah's eye across the table. She smiled and nodded slightly, our prearranged signal that the moment had arrived for our announcement. I stood up, feeling my heart rate accelerate as 6 pairs of eyes turned toward me with expectant attention. The dining room suddenly felt very quiet, the classical music from the living room barely audible over the sound of my own breathing. Before we continue with dessert, Sarah and I have something we want to share with all of you. I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. These monthly dinners have always been important to me. This family has been the foundation of everything good in my life, and I wanted you to be the first to know that Sarah and I are engaged. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then Linda gasped with delight, and Robert stood to shake my hand, and Eric raised his wine glass in a toast, and Michelle started asking Sarah about wedding plans. The room exploded with congratulations and questions and excitement as the news settled over the family like warm sunlight. Sarah displayed the engagement ring, which caught the light from the chandelier and drew appreciative comments from Linda and Michelle. Robert asked about our timeline for the wedding, and Eric wanted to know if we had chosen a venue yet. The children demanded to know if they could be in the wedding party, and David offered his services as the family photographer for any pre-wedding events we might plan. For 30 minutes, I basked in the glow of genuine family celebration. This was what I had always imagined belonging would feel like, surrounded by people who cared about my happiness, included in the kind of milestone moment that defined family relationships, welcomed into the circle of Thompson traditions and expectations. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes shining with joy and satisfaction at how perfectly the evening was unfolding. But as the initial excitement began to settle and conversation turned toward practical wedding planning, I noticed Robert checking his watch with the kind of subtle gesture that suggested he was monitoring time for some specific purpose. Linda excused herself to make coffee, declining Sarah's offer to help with a politeness that felt slightly forced. Eric's phone buzzed with a text message that made him frown briefly before putting the device away without responding. At 9:30, Linda returned from the kitchen carrying a silver coffee service and a plate of petit fours that I had not seen her prepare earlier. The coffee smelled rich and aromatic, Colombian beans ground fresh and brewed in the French press that Linda reserved for special occasions. "This seems like the perfect way to celebrate your engagement," Linda said, pouring coffee into delicate china cups painted with roses. A toast to Michael and Sarah's future together. Everyone accepted coffee except Michelle, who preferred tea, and the children, who had been excused to return to their video games upstairs. Robert raised his cup in another toast, this one more formal and elaborate than Eric's earlier wine celebration. "To Michael and Sarah," Robert said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of delivering important speeches at hospital functions and charity events. "May your marriage be blessed with the same love and commitment that has sustained this family for generations. Welcome to the Thompson family, Sarah. We are delighted to have you." The coffee was excellent, rich and smooth with notes of chocolate and nuts that lingered pleasantly on the palate. I was reaching for one of Linda's petit fours when I noticed movement outside the dining room window. A figure stood near the edge of the driveway, barely visible in the shadows between the landscape lighting fixtures. At first, I assumed it was a neighbor walking a dog or a delivery person checking house numbers. But something about the person's posture caught my attention. They seemed to be watching the house deliberately, standing still in a way that suggested purpose rather than coincidence. I was about to mention the figure to Robert when the person stepped closer to the window, moving into the circle of light cast by the exterior fixtures. It was a man, perhaps 40 years old, wearing clothes that had seen better days and carrying a backpack that looked like it held everything he owned. His hair was unkempt, his face weathered by exposure to the elements, his stance suggesting both desperation and determination. Sarah noticed my distraction and followed my gaze toward the window. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern as she saw the man standing in the Thompsons' front yard, clearly visible to anyone who cared to look outside. "Robert," I said quietly, trying not to alarm the rest of the family, "there's someone in your yard." Robert turned toward the window, his expression immediately shifting from celebration to protective concern. Eric stood up to get a better view, and Linda moved closer to Michelle with the instinctive gesture of a mother gathering her children. "I'll call the police," David said, reaching for his phone. But before anyone could take action, the man outside raised his hand and pointed directly at me. Not at the house or the family gathered around the dining room table, but specifically at me. His mouth moved as if he were speaking, though we could not hear his words through the closed windows. Then he held up a piece of cardboard with something written on it in large, dark letters. Even from inside the dining room, the message was clearly visible. "Don't drink the coffee." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked down at the cup in my hands, the coffee I had been sipping for the past 10 minutes, the celebratory toast that was supposed to seal my official welcome into the Thompson family. My mind raced through possibilities. Was this some kind of prank? A homeless person with mental health issues? A coincidence too strange to be believed? But something in the man's expression, something in the urgency of his gesture, convinced me that this was not random. He was trying to warn me specifically, and he was risking exposure and confrontation to do it. "Excuse me," I said, standing abruptly and setting down my coffee cup. "I need to step outside for a moment." "Michael, don't," Sarah said, reaching for my arm. "Let Robert handle this." But I was already moving toward the front door, driven by an instinct I could not explain or ignore. The man outside knew something about the coffee, something important enough to risk approaching a house full of strangers in an affluent neighborhood where homeless people were not welcome. I reached the front door just as Robert caught up with me, his face flushed with anger and concern. "Michael, this is not your responsibility. I'm calling the police to have this person removed from our property." "Give me 1 minute," I said, my hand already on the doorknob. "Let me just see what he wants." I opened the door before Robert could stop me and stepped onto the front porch. The night air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from someone's fireplace. The man stood about 20 feet away, close enough for conversation but far enough to run if the situation turned hostile. "You need to listen to me," the man said, his voice hoarse but urgent. "That coffee they gave you, something's wrong with it. I saw them preparing it earlier, adding something that shouldn't be there." "What are you talking about?" I asked, though my stomach was already clenching with a horrible understanding. "I've been watching this house for 3 days," the man continued, "sleeping in the park across the street, trying to work up the courage to approach you. I know who you are, Michael Thompson, and I know what they're planning to do to you tonight." Robert appeared beside me, phone in hand, clearly prepared to call for police assistance. "This is private property," he said firmly. "You need to leave immediately." But the homeless man ignored Robert entirely, keeping his eyes fixed on mine. "My name is Danny Morrison. I'm your brother, Michael, your biological brother. And that family in there is trying to drug you so you'll sign papers that will cost you everything you're entitled to inherit." The world seemed to tilt sideways. My biological brother? Papers to sign? Inheritance? None of it made sense, but the sincerity in the man's voice was unmistakable. "That's enough," Robert said, dialing 911. "I'm calling the police right now." "Check your coffee cup," Danny said desperately. "Look at the bottom. You'll see a residue that shouldn't be there. They've been planning this since they learned about your engagement. Once you're married, the inheritance laws change. They had to act tonight." I looked back toward the dining room, where Sarah and the rest of the family were watching through the windows with expressions ranging from concern to confusion. My coffee cup sat on the table where I had left it, innocent and elegant and suddenly terrifying. "This is insane," I said, but even as I spoke the words, pieces were falling into place. Robert's careful attention to the time. Linda's insistence on serving special coffee. The petit fours I had not seen her prepare. The way everyone except me seemed to know something I did not. "Your real name is Michael Morrison," Danny continued, speaking rapidly as Robert's call connected to emergency services. "Our father was William Morrison, and he died 6 months ago. He left everything to you, Michael. The house, the business, the investments. $23 million. But the Thompson family has been managing your trust fund since you were 6 years old, and they've been stealing from it for 28 years. Robert was speaking to the 911 operator, giving the address and describing a trespassing situation. But I barely heard him. $23 million. A trust fund that had been managed and stolen from for nearly 3 decades. A biological family I had never known existed. How do I know you're telling the truth?" I asked. Danny reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents. Birth certificates, DNA test results, legal papers. Your father hired a private investigator to find you 2 years ago. But you were so deeply embedded in the Thompson family that he decided to wait until after his death to make contact. He didn't want to disrupt your life, but he wanted you to know the truth eventually. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Danny looked toward the sound with resignation but continued talking. The Thompsons were supposed to be temporary guardians while the courts located your biological family. But they falsified documents, claimed you were abandoned, and convinced a judge to grant them permanent custody. They've been collecting payments from your trust fund every month for 28 years, telling the court system that you were developmentally disabled and needed specialized care. The sirens were getting louder. Danny pressed the envelope into my hands just as 2 police cars turned onto the cul-de-sac, their lights flashing blue and red across the quiet neighborhood. "The coffee contains a mild sedative and a drug that makes people more suggestible," Danny said quickly. "They were going to have you sign papers tonight transferring your inheritance to a family trust controlled by Robert. Check the bottom of your cup, Michael. See for yourself." The police cars pulled into the driveway, officers emerging with hands on their weapons, clearly prepared for a potentially dangerous situation. Danny raised his hands in surrender, but kept his eyes locked on mine. "Read the documents," he said as the officers approached. "Get your own DNA test. Find out who you really are." "Sir, step away from the house," one of the officers commanded. Danny complied immediately, walking toward the police cars with his hands visible and his movements slow and non-threatening. I stood on the porch holding the manila envelope, my mind reeling from everything I had just heard. Behind me, I could hear the Thompson family gathering in the foyer, their voices a mixture of concern and relief that the situation was being handled by professionals. "Are you all right, sir?" one of the officers asked me. "Did this individual threaten you or attempt to harm you in any way?" "No," I said slowly. "He was just confused. I think he has me mixed up with someone else." But even as I spoke the words, I knew they were not true. Danny Morrison, if that was really his name, had known details about my life that no random homeless person could have learned by observation. My engagement to Sarah, my fear of not belonging in the Thompson family, my desperate need for approval and acceptance. The officers took Danny into custody, loading him into the back of one of the patrol cars. As they drove away, he looked back at me through the rear window with an expression of desperate hope that I would not ignore what he had told me. Robert's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and reassuring. "I'm sorry you had to experience that, son. There are a lot of troubled people in the world, and sometimes they fixate on successful families like ours. Are you ready to come back inside and finish celebrating your engagement?" I looked down at the envelope in my hands. It felt substantial, real, full of documents that might confirm or refute everything the homeless man had claimed. But walking back into that dining room suddenly felt like stepping into a trap I had not recognized was being set. "Actually, I think I should take Sarah home," I said. "This has been a lot of excitement for one evening." "Of course," Robert said, though I detected a note of disappointment in his voice. "But perhaps you could just finish your coffee first? Linda made it specially for the occasion." The request seemed innocent enough, but after Danny's warning, it felt loaded with sinister implications. I forced a smile and nodded, following Robert back into the house where Sarah and the rest of the family waited with expressions of concern and curiosity. "What did he want?" Sarah asked, taking my arm as we returned to the dining room. "Just confused," I said. "Thought I was someone else." But as I approached my place at the table, I found myself looking at the coffee cup with new eyes. It was the same elegant china Linda had served everyone else, but now it seemed to hold possibilities I had never considered. Was there really a sedative in the coffee? Were the Thompsons capable of drugging me? And if so, what papers were they planning to have me sign? I picked up the cup and tilted it slightly, examining the bottom as Danny had suggested. There, almost invisible against the white porcelain, was a faint residue that looked different from normal coffee grounds. Something crystalline and unnatural that should not have been present in a freshly brewed beverage. My hands began to shake slightly. Everything Danny had told me suddenly seemed not only possible but probable. The strange timing of tonight's celebration, the expensive coffee service, the way Robert had monitored the time throughout the evening, the papers that were probably hidden somewhere in his study, waiting for my signature once the drugs took effect. "Michael," Sarah said, noticing my distraction. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I said, setting down the coffee cup without taking another sip. "Just tired from a long day." But I was not fine. I was beginning to understand that nothing about my life was what I had believed it to be. The family that had raised me, the identity I had constructed, the belonging I had desperately sought. It was all built on lies and deception that went back to my earliest childhood. Linda appeared at my elbow with a concerned expression. "You really should finish your coffee, dear. I made it especially for tonight, and you've barely touched it." "I've had enough caffeine for one day," I said, pushing the cup further away from me. "Nonsense," Robert interjected, moving to stand behind my chair. "It's a celebration. One more cup won't hurt anything." The pressure was subtle but unmistakable. Both Robert and Linda seemed unusually invested in my coffee consumption, their insistence carrying an urgency that felt completely disproportionate to the situation. I looked around the table at the faces of the people who had shaped my entire adult life. Eric was checking his phone again, his expression unreadable. Michelle was helping Sophie with her dessert, apparently oblivious to the tension building around the coffee situation. David was discussing weekend plans with Jennifer, their conversation too loud and animated to be entirely natural. Only Sarah seemed genuinely confused by the evening's developments. Her concern appeared authentic, her attention focused on me rather than on whatever agenda the rest of the family was pursuing. "You know what?" I said, standing abruptly. "I think I'm coming down with something. Sarah, would you mind if we called it an early night?" "Of course not," Sarah said immediately, also standing. "Are you feeling sick?" "Just a headache," I lied. "But I should probably get some rest before it gets worse." The Thompson family accepted this explanation with varying degrees of disappointment and understanding. Linda packed leftover dessert for us to take home. Robert shook my hand and congratulated me again on the engagement. Eric hugged me and promised to call later in the week to discuss bachelor party plans. But throughout the ritual of goodbyes and thank yous, I caught subtle exchanges of glances between family members that suggested they were communicating information I was not meant to understand. The evening had not proceeded according to their plan, and they were adapting in real time to circumstances they had not anticipated. As Sarah and I walked to our cars, she took my arm and looked up at me with concerned eyes. "That was strange," she said. "The homeless man, the coffee insistence, the way everyone seemed on edge. What do you think was really going on?" I looked back at the Thompson house, warm and inviting with its lights glowing against the autumn night. For 28 years, it had represented safety and belonging and the closest thing to unconditional love I had ever known. But now it seemed like a beautiful prison that had been designed to keep me contained and compliant while my real life was stolen away from me. "I don't know," I said, though the manila envelope in my jacket pocket felt like it might contain all the answers I had been seeking. "But I'm going to find out." Sarah and I drove separately back to my apartment in Belltown, a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Elliott Bay. The loft was my sanctuary, filled with architectural drawings and design books and furniture I had chosen based on comfort rather than family approval. It was the one place where I could be completely myself without performing for anyone's benefit. Sarah made tea while I sat at my dining room table and opened the manila envelope Danny Morrison had pressed into my hands. The documents inside were extensive and official-looking. Birth certificates, court records, financial statements, and legal documents that painted a picture of deception and betrayal that was even worse than I had imagined. According to the papers, I had been born Michael James Morrison in Spokane, Washington on March 15, 1989. My biological parents were William Morrison and Catherine Morrison, both deceased. William had died 6 months earlier, leaving behind an estate worth approximately $23 million derived from a successful construction business and decades of careful investment. The court records told a different story than the one I had always believed about my childhood. I had not been abandoned or given up for adoption. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 6 years old, and I had been placed temporarily with the Thompson family while social workers located my biological relatives. But according to these documents, the Thompsons had falsified reports about my mental and emotional state, claiming I was severely developmentally disabled and unlikely to ever live independently. Based on those false reports, a judge had granted the Thompsons permanent custody and appointed them as trustees of my inheritance from my parents' estate. For 28 years, they had been collecting monthly payments supposedly for my care and specialized education. The financial statements showed that they had received over $400,000 in trust fund payments, money that should have been saved for my benefit when I reached adulthood. But the most devastating revelation was contained in a letter from my biological father, written shortly before his death and addressed specifically to me. The handwriting was shaky but determined, filled with a love and regret that brought tears to my eyes. "My dear son Michael," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone and you have finally learned the truth about who you are and where you came from. I want you to know that not a single day has passed in the last 28 years that I did not think about you and wonder what kind of man you had become." The letter went on to explain that William Morrison had spent years searching for me after discovering that his nephew, my biological father, had died leaving behind a young son. By the time he located me, I was deeply embedded in the Thompson family and apparently thriving in my new environment. Rather than disrupt my life, he had decided to monitor my progress from a distance and ensure that I would eventually inherit everything that was rightfully mine. "I hired private investigators to keep track of your achievements," the letter continued. "I attended your high school graduation ceremony, sitting in the back row where you would not notice me. I was there when you received your architecture degree from the University of Washington, proud beyond words of the intelligent and talented man you had become. I have followed your career and your relationships, always hoping that someday I would find the courage to introduce myself. The letter explained that William had only recently discovered the truth about the Thompson family's deception. The trust fund payments were supposed to have stopped when I turned 18 and demonstrated my ability to live independently. Instead, the Thompsons had continued filing false reports about my mental state, collecting money meant for my care, while I built a successful career and adult life completely unaware of my inheritance. Your brother Danny has been homeless for the past 3 years, the letter continued. Not because he lacks intelligence or motivation, but because he has been fighting a legal battle to expose the Thompson family's theft and reclaim what belongs to both of you. He has sacrificed everything to seek justice for our family, and I pray that by the time you read this, he will have found the courage to approach you directly. I looked up from the letter to find Sarah watching me with an expression of shock and concern. She had been reading over my shoulder, absorbing the same devastating revelations that were reshaping my understanding of everything I thought I knew about my life. "This is impossible," Sarah said softly. "The Thompsons have been so good to you. They paid for your education, supported your career, welcomed you into their family. With money they stole from me," I said, my voice hollow with realization. "Everything they did for me was paid for with my own inheritance." The financial documents painted a clear picture of theft and manipulation that had been ongoing for nearly 3 decades. The Thompsons had used my trust fund money to pay for their own children's education, to fund their lifestyle, to make investments that benefited them personally rather than preserving my inheritance. They had treated my parents' estate as their personal bank account while convincing me to be grateful for their charity. I thought about all the times I had felt guilty for not appreciating the Thompson family enough, all the moments when I had questioned my own worthiness of their love and support. They had manipulated my natural insecurity about belonging, using my desperate need for acceptance to keep me compliant and grateful while they systematically stole everything that should have been mine. The DNA test results confirmed what Danny Morrison had claimed. We were biological brothers, both sons of William Morrison and both entitled to share in his estate. The test had been conducted just 6 months earlier, shortly after William's death, when Danny had finally gathered enough evidence to prove the truth about our identities and the Thompson family's deception. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. I looked out at the lights of Seattle spreading across the darkness. The city where I had built what I thought was my life but now understood was just an elaborate performance. Tomorrow I would have to confront the Thompson family with the truth. I would have to demand an accounting of 28 years of theft and deception. I would have to decide whether to pursue criminal charges against the people who had raised me. But tonight, I just wanted to sit with the knowledge that everything I had believed about myself was wrong. I was not a grateful foster child who had been rescued from abandonment. I was the heir to a substantial fortune, a man with a biological family that had never stopped looking for me, a person whose entire identity had been constructed on lies designed to benefit the people who claimed to love me. "I'm going to find my brother," I said finally. "I'm going to learn the truth about my biological family, and then I'm going to decide what to do about the Thompsons." Sarah nodded, her expression serious but supportive. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But Michael, you need to be prepared for the possibility that this will change everything about your relationship with the family that raised you." I thought about the coffee cup sitting on Linda's dining room table, the sedative residue at the bottom, the papers they had probably planned to have me sign once the drugs took effect. Whatever love or affection I had felt from the Thompson family had been conditional on my continued ignorance and compliance. Once I demanded the truth, once I reclaimed what was rightfully mine, that conditional love would disappear as quickly as it had been manufactured. But for the first time in my adult life, I was not afraid of losing the Thompson family's approval. I was finally ready to discover who Michael Morrison was supposed to be, rather than continuing to perform as the grateful foster child Michael Thompson had been trained to become. The police station was busy even at 11 o'clock at night, filled with the usual collection of drunks and petty criminals and domestic violence cases that kept Seattle's finest busy during the weekend hours. I found Danny Morrison in a holding cell, sitting on a narrow bench with his back against the concrete wall and his eyes closed as if he were trying to sleep through the chaos around him. When the desk sergeant brought him to the visiting room, I was struck by how much we resembled each other despite the 20 years of different circumstances that separated our experiences. We had the same dark hair, the same angular features, the same green eyes that I had always assumed were a genetic accident. Looking at Danny was like seeing a version of myself that had been shaped by entirely different forces. "You came," Danny said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and relief. "I wasn't sure you would believe me." "I read the documents," I said. "I had my own DNA test done this afternoon. We're definitely brothers." I had spent the day in a state of controlled fury, driving from the police station to a private laboratory that could process DNA samples quickly for an additional fee. The results had confirmed what the documents already suggested. Danny Morrison and I shared the same biological parents, the same inheritance rights, the same claim to the estate that had been stolen from us for nearly 3 decades. "The Thompson family has been stealing from us for 28 years, I continued. "They drugged my coffee last night and tried to get me to sign papers transferring my inheritance to them." Danny nodded grimly. "I've been trying to expose them for 3 years, but no one would listen to a homeless man making accusations against a respected family. I needed you to see the truth for yourself before anyone would take the case seriously." I had also spent part of the day consulting with lawyers, learning about the legal options available for recovering stolen inheritance and pursuing criminal charges against the Thompson family. The case was complicated by the length of time that had passed and the legitimate guardianship that had been established through fraudulent means. But the financial theft was clear and substantial enough to warrant serious prosecution. "I want to help you," I said. "I want to expose what they did to us and recover every dollar they stole from our family." "It won't be easy," Danny warned. "They have money and connections and 28 years of fake documentation to support their story. And pursuing them means accepting that the people who raised you are criminals who manipulated you your entire life." I thought about the Thompson family as I had seen them the night before, gathered around their dining room table, celebrating my engagement while secretly planning to drug me into signing away my inheritance. The warmth and acceptance I had craved from them had been nothing more than a performance designed to keep me compliant and grateful while they systematically robbed me of my birthright. "They're not my family," I said. "They never were. They were just criminals who got away with kidnapping and theft for 3 decades. Danny's eyes filled with tears. "Our father never stopped looking for you, even after he got sick. Even when the doctors said he only had months to live, he was still trying to find a way to bring you home." The word home hit me like a physical blow. For 28 years, I had been trying to earn my place in the Thompson family, desperate to belong somewhere and be loved unconditionally. But I had never been an outsider trying to break into an established family. I had been a kidnapped child, separated from the people who actually loved me, manipulated into being grateful for the very people who had stolen my life. "Tell me about him," I said. "Tell me about our father." Danny smiled for the first time since I had met him, his face transforming from the weathered mask of a homeless man into something warmer and more hopeful. "William Morrison was the strongest man I ever knew," Danny began. "He built Morrison Construction from nothing, just him and a pickup truck and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. But he never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped caring about family." Over the next 2 hours, Danny told me stories about the father I had never known and the family I had been stolen from. William Morrison had been a successful businessman, but he had also been a devoted single parent who had raised Danny with love and attention and unwavering support. He had remarried late in life to a woman named Catherine, and their brief marriage had produced me before the car accident that killed both my parents and changed the trajectory of my entire life. He used to talk about you all the time, Danny continued, wondering what you looked like, what kind of person you were becoming, whether you were happy in your new life. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I would find you and tell you the truth about where you came from. The bail money I posted for Danny was a small fraction of what the Thompson family had stolen from us, but it felt like the first step toward reclaiming control of my life. As we walked out of the police station together, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was not alone. I had a brother who understood my history, who shared my DNA, who had sacrificed everything to seek justice for our family. What happens now? Danny asked as we reached my car. Now we go home, I said. Our real home, the one our father left for us. The Morrison family estate was located in Spokane Valley, about 2 hours east of Seattle. William Morrison had built the house himself in the 1980s, a sprawling ranch-style home on 15 acres of land that included mature pine trees and a small lake that reflected the mountains in the distance. It was nothing like the suburban perfection of the Thompson house in Bellevue, but as soon as I saw it, I understood that this was where I belonged. Danny had keys to the house, having spent months preparing it for my eventual arrival. The interior was comfortable rather than elegant, filled with handmade furniture and family photographs that told the story of the Morrison clan across multiple generations. There were pictures of my biological parents, young and happy and clearly in love. There were photos of Danny as a child, grinning at birthday parties and Christmas mornings. And there was an empty space on the mantelpiece where a picture of me should have been, a gap that represented 28 years of forced separation. He kept your room exactly as it was when you were 6, Danny said, leading me down a hallway lined with more family photographs. He always believed you would come home someday. The room was painted blue with white trim, decorated with toys and books that a 6-year-old boy would have loved. A twin bed sat against one wall, covered with a quilt that showed cowboys and horses. A bookshelf held picture books about dinosaurs and trucks and adventure stories. A toy box in the corner overflowed with building blocks and action figures and games that had been carefully preserved for nearly 3 decades. I stood in the doorway of my childhood bedroom, overwhelmed by the love and hope that had gone into maintaining this space for a son who might never return. William Morrison had believed in my eventual homecoming so completely that he had refused to change a single detail, keeping faith that someday his little boy would walk through that door and reclaim his place in the Morrison family. There's something else, Danny said, opening the top drawer of a small dresser. Something he wanted you to have when you came home. He handed me a wooden box, handcrafted and polished to a warm glow. Inside was a collection of items that told the story of my early childhood. Baby pictures, a hospital bracelet from when I was born, my first pair of shoes, a drawing I had made when I was 5 years old showing a stick figure family with the word Daddy written in crayon letters. At the bottom of the box was a letter in my own 6-year-old handwriting, addressed to Santa Claus and dated December 1995. The letter was simple and heartbreaking. Dear Santa, please bring Mommy and Daddy back. I will be good forever if you can make them not be dead anymore. Love, Michael. I sank onto the edge of the twin bed, holding the letter and crying for the little boy who had lost everything and been told to be grateful for the scraps he was given in return. The Thompson family had not rescued me from abandonment. They had kidnapped me from a loving family and convinced me that I should be thankful for their theft. Danny sat beside me on the small bed, his presence solid and reassuring in a way that reminded me of how siblings should support each other. Not with competition and comparison, like my relationship with Eric and Michelle, but with unconditional acceptance and shared understanding. He loved you so much, Danny said softly. Even though he only had you for 6 years, You were the center of his world. He used to say that losing you was like having his heart cut out, but he never stopped believing that someday you would come home. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn love from people who were stealing from me, all the energy I had wasted chasing approval from criminals who had built their comfortable life on the foundation of my family's tragedy. The Thompson family had not just robbed me of money. They had robbed me of 28 years of belonging to the people who actually loved me. But sitting in my childhood bedroom with my biological brother beside me, I finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. Not a place where love had to be earned through performance and achievement, but a place where love was simply assumed, simply given, simply there. "I want to take them down," I said, my voice steady with determination. "I want to expose every lie they told, recover every dollar they stole, and make sure they face consequences for what they did to our family." Danny nodded, his expression serious but hopeful. "It's going to be a long fight. They have lawyers and money and 28 years of fake documentation. But we have the truth, and we have each other." I looked around the room that had been waiting for me to come home, filled with toys and books and memories of the little boy I had been before the Thompson family rewrote my history. Tomorrow, I would return to Seattle and confront the people who had raised me with their crimes. I would demand an accounting of decades of theft and deception. I would reclaim my identity as Michael Morrison and leave behind the grateful foster child performance I had been maintaining for most of my life. But tonight, for the first time in 28 years, I was exactly where I belonged. 3 months later, Sarah and I were married in the backyard of the Morrison family estate, surrounded by the pine trees and mountains that had been part of my heritage all along. It was a small ceremony, attended by Sarah's family and a few close friends who had supported us through the legal battle that followed my discovery of the truth about my identity. The Thompson family was notably absent, having been arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and filing false documents with the court system. Robert Thompson had been suspended from his position at the hospital pending a full investigation of his finances. Linda Thompson faced criminal charges for her role in maintaining the fraudulent reports about my mental state. Eric and Michelle had hired their own lawyers, claiming ignorance of their parents' crimes, while fighting to protect their own financial interests. The legal proceedings had been messy and painful, involving depositions and document recovery and testimony that laid bare 3 decades of systematic theft and manipulation. The Thompson family had stolen over $2 million from my trust fund, money they had used to fund their lifestyle and their biological children's education while convincing me to be grateful for their charity. But more than the money, they had stolen my sense of identity and belonging. They had convinced a 6-year-old boy that he was lucky to be wanted by anyone, that he should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection he received, that his worth was contingent on his continued good behavior and achievement. They had weaponized my natural desire to belong against me, using my desperation for family approval to keep me compliant while they robbed me of everything that should have been mine. The criminal cases were still pending, but the civil recovery had been swift and substantial. Danny and I had reclaimed the Morrison family estate, the construction business, and the investment portfolio that our father had built over decades of hard work. More importantly, we had reclaimed our family name and our connection to each other. Danny had been my best man at the wedding, standing beside me in a rented tuxedo that transformed him from a homeless man into the successful businessman he was beginning to become again. Together, we were rebuilding Morrison Construction, honoring our father's legacy while creating something new for the next generation of our family. Sarah had embraced the Morrison family history with the same grace she brought to everything else in her life. She loved the estate, loved the stories Danny told about our father, loved the idea of building our life together in a place where love was freely given rather than earned through performance. Our wedding ceremony had been simple and authentic, focused on the promises we were making to each other rather than the show we were putting on for other people's approval. As we danced to our first song as husband and wife, surrounded by people who loved us without conditions or expectations, I thought about the path that had brought me to this moment. The homeless man's warning about the coffee had saved me from signing away my inheritance, but it had also saved me from a lifetime of performing for people who would never truly accept me as family. The Thompson family had given me their name and their conditional love, but they had never given me the one thing I had always craved: a sense of belonging. That belonging had been waiting for me in the Morrison family estate all along, preserved in a 6-year-old boy's bedroom and a father's unwavering faith that his son would someday come home. Standing in the backyard of my real family's home, holding my wife close while my brother smiled at us from the edge of the dance floor, I finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. Not a place where you had to earn your keep, but a place where you were simply welcomed. Not a family that tolerated your presence, but a family that celebrated your existence. I had spent 34 years trying to prove that I deserved to belong somewhere. But home was not something that needed to be earned. Home was something that had been waiting for me all along, patient and faithful, and filled with the kind of love that never needed to be justified or explained. The Morrison family had found its way back together, and we were finally truly home. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I've left 2 more stories here on your screen, both from men who discovered that family isn't always who you're born to. It's who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it's like to be the outsider looking in, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your story matters, even if they tried to erase it.